I never imagined my life could take such a devastating turn. 6 years ago, I married Emily, the woman I believed to be my soulmate. Alongside her was Jake, my best friend since childhood, a man I considered more like a brother than a friend. Together, they formed the two most cherished pillars of my life. I trusted them implicitly, never doubting their loyalty or love for a moment. But then, the unthinkable happened. It began subtly, so subtly that I dismissed the signs as mere coincidences. Emily and Jake always got along well, something I had appreciated. Their easy laughter, occasional texts, and shared inside jokes never struck me as unusual. Why would they? Jake was family to me, and Emily was my wife. It felt natural that they would share a bond. Over time, however, their interactions took on a different tone. When Jake came over, Emily seemed uncharacteristically excited. She dressed a little nicer, laughed harder at his jokes, and found reasons to stay in the room with us rather than giving Jake and me our usual guy time. Still, I convinced myself it was harmless. They were friends, nothing more, or so I thought. Then came the coincidences that were harder to ignore. Jake started showing up unannounced when I wasn't home. Emily always had an explanation. He was dropping something off or just stopping by for a quick hello. But the frequency of his visits left me uneasy, even if I couldn't put my finger on why. The breaking point came on a Saturday I'll never forget. An unexpected work shift had me leaving home early in the morning, but due to a mix-up at the office, I was sent back home by noon. As I pulled into the driveway, Jake's car was parked out front. It wasn't unusual for him to visit, but something about the sight of his car made my stomach knot. When I stepped inside, the house was eerily quiet. The living room, usually a hub of activity, was empty. "Emily," called out, but there was no response. That's when I heard muffled voices coming from the bedroom. My heart thudded in my chest, a dreadful suspicion taking hold. I walked down the hallway, every step heavier than the last. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, and with trembling hands, I pushed it open. The scene before me stopped me cold. Emily and Jake sat on the bed, their faces pale as they looked up at me. Jake's shirt was unbuttoned, and Emily, disheveled and visibly shaken, was wearing one of my hoodies. The air was thick with tension and the unmistakable sense that I had just walked in on something I wasn't meant to see. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. Emily stammered, her words a tangled mess. It's not what it looks like." Jake stood quickly, his hands raised in a defensive gesture. "Dude, calm down. We were just talking." "Talking?" I repeated, my voice rising. "In my bedroom, looking like this. Do you really expect me to believe that?" Emily began to cry, her tears doing nothing to soften the rage and disbelief surging through me. Jake, meanwhile, stumbled through a half-baked explanation about how they were comforting each other. The excuse they offered was so ludicrous, so absurd, it would have been laughable if it hadn't come at the expense of everything I held dear. In that moment, the two people I trusted most had shattered my world, and there was no going back.
If I weren't so consumed with fury, I might have laughed at the absurdity of their explanation. Emily claimed she and Jake had been confiding in each other about their struggles. Emily about our marriage, and Jake about his personal life. They didn't want to burden me with their problems, she said, as though that somehow justified what I had walked in on. "So, you decided to have this heart-to-heart in my bedroom while I was at work?" I asked, my voice thick with sarcasm and disbelief. Jake, looking as guilty as a child caught stealing, stammered, "It's not like that, man. I'd never do that to you." But the guilt on their faces told me everything I needed to know. I didn't stick around to listen to more of their pathetic excuses. My chest tight with rage and heartbreak, I grabbed my keys and left the house, desperate for space to process the betrayal. Uncovering the truth. Over the next few days, suspicion and pain gnawed at me. I couldn't let it go. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, I gave in to my gut feeling and checked her phone. What I found shattered any lingering hope I had. Their text messages weren't merely friendly or supportive. They were filled with flirtation and intimate plans to meet, proof that their so-called confiding had crossed every line of trust. It was all there in black and white. They had betrayed me in the most personal way imaginable. Confrontation and admission. When I confronted Emily again, she broke down, unable to maintain the charade any longer. Through sobs, she admitted the truth. She and Jake had been involved in an emotional affair for months. While she swore up and down that nothing physical had happened, her assurances felt hollow. By that point, the betrayal was so deep that I no longer cared about the specifics. Whether or not they'd crossed the final line didn't matter. They had already destroyed my trust. I cut Jake out of my life immediately. Losing my best friend felt like ripping away a part of my own identity, but it couldn't compare to the pain of losing the trust I'd placed in Emily. For me, that trust was the foundation of our marriage, and now it was irreparably shattered. A time for reflection. I told Emily I needed time apart and moved into a friend's apartment. For weeks, she begged me for another chance, promising to do whatever it took to repair the damage. She suggested therapy, swore she'd never speak to Jake again, and vowed to prove her love to me. But every time I looked at her, all I could see was betrayal. Her words, no matter how sincere, couldn't erase the memories of what I'd uncovered. The final decision. In the end, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I filed for divorce. Letting go of the life we had built, the future we had planned, and the woman I thought I knew was excruciating. But deep down, I understood that I deserved better. Someone who valued loyalty and honesty as much as I did. Jake, unsurprisingly, vanished from my life without so much as an apology. I heard through mutual friends that he'd tried to justify his actions, but no one bought his excuses. His betrayal cost him more than just my friendship. Moving forward, the entire ordeal left me devastated, but it also taught me an invaluable lesson. Trust is fragile, and not everyone deserves it. Now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I've surrounded myself with people who genuinely care about loyalty and integrity, and I'm working on rediscovering my own happiness. What I went through was soul-crushing, but it didn't break me. If anything, it made me stronger, wiser, and more determined to never settle for less than I deserve.